If my kids wait until they're as old as I was when they have children, I'll be 76 years old when my first grandchild is born. If I want those kids to know their grandma, I'm gonna have to take very good care of my body. Which is why I'm so happy to have discovered Aubrey de Grey. Aubrey de Grey is a gerontologist, he's a genetic biologist. He's also a former software engineer. He's kind of a lot of things. He said in an interview with Wired magazine, if we implement SENS, it's a company he started. It is looking for strategic strategies for engineered negligible senescence. Aubrey de Grey has been researching how to not stop us from aging, rather discover the causes of the way our body becomes more ill as we age, and find ways to retread so that we last longer and better. There are several reasons why I think we need Aubrey de Grey if we're going to save the human race. Reason number one, the long game. There are cultures who believe that you should, when making a decision, think back 7 generations and look for the wisdom and the patterns. And also look ahead 7 generations and think about how your decision may be impacting people 7 generations down the line. A lot of the people in power today in the world, with the power to make huge decisions that change the whole social scene, don't seem to be having the long view. I expect, however, if our CEOs, our lobbyists, and our congressmen expected to live 800 years, they'd care more about global warming. The long view. Number 2, the economy. You don't have to be following the healthcare debate to realize how expensive healthcare is. However, the cost of healthcare for a 35-year-old person is negligible. It's the older you get, the more these age-related illnesses crop up, and you become more and more expensive. Let's think about just one age-related disease, Alzheimer's disease. 1 in 8 people over the age of 65 in America has Alzheimer's, has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, not counting when it's not diagnosed. When you get to the age of 80, it's 1 in 2, half. I have some personal experience with Alzheimer's. My former foster father has Alzheimer's, and it's made him. Well, let's go back and define Alzheimer's a little bit. The Mayo Clinic says Alzheimer's is a degeneration, death of brain cells. It creates both mental and physical disabilities. And no 2 Alzheimer's patients are the same. When my father-in-law, the first thing that happened was he lost his balance, my stepdad. He's 6'3", and when he falls down, his wife, who's barely 5 feet tall, has to call an aid car because she can't get him up. He's also lost a little bit of common sense. He comes up to me and says, "Let me hold that baby." And we're like, "Sit down, please." But let me tell you, it's not just the Alzheimer's patients that suffer. Caretakers many studies show that caretakers have a very greater chance of mental suffering, mental illness, and emotional damage, depression, anxiety. And they also have shorter lifespans and much higher sickness. And Alzheimer's is a disease that lasts a long time and just gets progressively worse. So the caretakers of Alzheimer's patients suffer more than most other caretakers. Imagine a world without Alzheimer's alone, just that one disease, just that one. But let's think about economy in a different way. Think about your personal economy. We all live our life right now on the assumption that we're going to stop working at the age of 60-something. Because our bodies will be starting to wear out. What if that weren't the problem? What if we could assume that we're going to be healthy right up until a train hits us? Then we don't have to, it's not so much about plan for retirement, but we don't have to be afraid that we're not going to be able to support ourselves. In fact, we could work for many, many years, retire, spend a couple decades in retirement, and then Stage a comeback, have a whole different career. Maybe 3 or 4 careers. Think how valuable we'd be to society. The economy, quality of life. Let's not even talk about Viagra, Geritol, Boniva. Those would be off the table. But think about not having to wonder who's going to take care of you when you get old. Or even more poignant for our generation, who's going to watch after your parents? 1 in 2 has Alzheimer's at age 80. Caretakers. I have children and aging parents. That's a lot of work. Think about if that were no longer an issue. Your parents are young and healthy and seem as fine as you. Be magnificent. And the fourth point, I think is the most important, I call necessary wisdom. Imagine if Albert Einstein were alive today. If he'd been alive all these long years, all these long decades, and had been working and learning and researching and doing his math. Think of all the things he might have solved and all the things he might have invented. I mean, he would have been building on what he already had, so he would only become, his intelligence and his body of work would just be larger and larger. Now multiply that by hundreds of thousands. Physicists, engineers, mathematicians, artists. I think we need the kind of wisdom that takes decades and decades to build if we're going to solve the problems of the 21st century. Now, before you start looking for my tinfoil hat, I encourage you to look at least the top 2 of my references here. I can send you an e-copy of this if you like. I found this TED by Aubrey de Grey compelling, and the Radio Lab has science behind it that explains, thank you, that explains how this is actually possible. And I hope that after this speech and after reading my resources, you will, with me, hope that Aubrey de Grey himself lives long enough to reach his goals and save the human race. Fellow Toastmasters,